here on Durrock. Oh,
this meeting is being recorded.
Liana, you might want to, is your mic off? Because otherwise we'll get feedback. Yeah, perfect. So welcome everybody. My name's Shirley Gilbert. I'm a Goodnichbara woman. I work at Western Sydney University. I'd like to acknowledge that today I'm working on Durrock land, and I also live here on Durrock country. And it's a privilege and an honour to be in front of so many of you. Many of you I've met across the many decades that I've been working in the Aboriginal space. Leslie, probably the longest. More than 30-something years, I think, since, that I've known Leslie on and off through Aboriginal studies and HSC marking. And then there's a number of you who I have as past students and alumni and then current students, but also I'd also like to acknowledge that we've got quite a few rural and regional, Bega and Broome. We've got other states and territories today. So I'd like to acknowledge all of those elders past, present, who inform our practice. I'd also like to acknowledge all the Aboriginal lands in which we work on, and we strive for hopefully the best we can do in the Aboriginal education space. I started off my career as an agricultural science teacher and then retrained as a history teacher, which is where Kathy and some of those early alumni know me from. And then, of course, I've got my current alumni and some other people in the space. So I teach a unit now at university called Aboriginal and Culturally Responsive Pedagogies to pre-service secondary teachers. So I'm just going to start up the good old PowerPoint because that's how we run in these COVID/online forums. And I've just got to get the technology happening properly here. Okay. Just to let you know that post this presentation, you'll get a copy of the presentation slides. Won't be instantly today, and you'll get a copy of the program that I've put together that kind of covers this with the resources. So there's all a bank of resources. So basically you'll get that and you'll get access to a Dropbox for a couple of weeks to access all of those bits and pieces so that you can build your suitcase, if you like, of resources. I'd also like to acknowledge Arnie Jean South, who is my co-conspirator at Western Sydney. She's our elder in residence and she's sitting there, not with the camera on, but that's okay. Annie Jean comes into all of my classes and works with me diligently. And I've been lucky enough, I suppose, also to have been working with Auntie Heather Wilson in Elliot in the Northern Territory, and learning bilingually, Mudbara and Jingli language for a number of years, in some holiday teaching episodes for 4 weeks at a time. I've been quite privileged in also other elders that I've worked with over those years. So I'd like to acknowledge all of them in the key contributions they've made to who I am as an Aboriginal educator. There is an email there if you ever want to email me. I've done the non-university one because I just did the regular Gmail. When I looked at who's here and who's not here today, we've got quite a number of pre-service teachers. We've got a lot of early career teachers, so graduate teachers moving towards proficient who are working in the high schools around New South Wales. And I was surprised to see then also a number of teachers who have been there 6 to 10 years and the 10 years plus, still hoping to get more. So hopefully I'll fill in some of those needs that you're wanting, some fresh ideas or whatever it is in terms of your teaching portfolios. Given that many of us are in that graduate or proficient area, hopefully most of you will get what you need for your accreditation. And that's either 1.4 or 2.4 at the graduate and or the proficient level. I've got a little, I'm just going to move the, and that this is really mostly directed at providing opportunities. So it's at that proficient level rather than at the graduate level, but I know I've got a few pre-service teachers in the mix here. For most of us, most of this content sits clearly within Standard 2, and it's not just about 2.4, it's about literacy and numeracy strategies. It's also about curriculum ICT learning opportunities, so 2.6.2, 2.5.2 for the proficient members in the room, demonstrating 2.1, and planning and implementing sequences of teaching and learning, so Standard 3. So that's where it professionally sits for us, and hopefully we get a number of things out of today's professional conversations. So I want you to think about ancient Australia and particularly the challenges. Sorry, I'm just having a little voice thing and I just want to get rid of the chat box out of my vision. You know, how do we convey, you know, Aboriginal Australia and the complexities of our communities to not only our learners, but to our peers as well, the teachers we're supervising, etc. When so much of the Aboriginal historical information is what we call missing or fragmented, and sometimes almost invisible, and things that are not really recorded and documented the way that other Western imperial or historical evidence is depicted in the textbooks. So what do we offer in the new Australian curriculum? How do we work with people like archaeologists? And I've also been lucky enough to work with a couple of archaeologists over my career to unpack this historical inquiry method, or HIM, as we often call it in history. We also need to think about these things that sit outside our curriculum around contestability, continuity and change, and particularly our Aboriginal perspectives, and how do we do them the justice and create authentic representation of those, but also authentic experiences for our learners in our classrooms. And finally, what can the profession, how can we stimulate critical thinking and challenging notions of the invisibility of Aboriginal people in the landscape of Australia's ancient past? And so I want you to think about, if you were a historian, and how would you approach, now it's decided it doesn't want to use that key. That's gracious. Slow. I've got 3 screens open and the computer does not like 3 screens. It only likes 2. Let's to go. Mouse on the right side. So I want you to think about, if you were a historian and you brought in a plastic bottle like this, and you asked the students, what will remain in 50 or 100 or 150 years? if this is what you located in the historical record, and how might this be interpreted? Anybody got any ideas about what might be left if you were looking in the historical record in 50 years? Do we think we'd still see some plastic bottles? Pretty much, I think.
Yep.
Aluminium cans, maybe. But what about, how would we interpret that if we didn't know that this is one of the ways in which those plastic bottles are currently being used? Has anybody ever seen this? I have, particularly in when I worked in the Territory, and we did a Clean Up Australia thing, and we have a full, it's 100% Aboriginal student population, and you know they were all running off because we don't wear shoes at school, and they were all running off because they were in the tip, and we were doing the clean-up thing, and we were looking for aluminium cans, and they're all running around getting plastic bottles. So they weren't just plastic bottles, they were shoes. And so they were all squashing these lovely plastic bottles everywhere and slipping on them as shoes. And then I went looking and I went, actually, we're not the only culture that does this. And the image on the right is, you know, one of the other Asian cultures. So when we're looking for links between Asia and Australia and we're looking for history, one of the ways I like to do this is that I actually myself wear into the classroom 2 plastic bottles. And I think you have to make a historical impact on these students. I think, you know, particularly because we're working with Year 7, and this unit is, you know, supposed to be one of their first introductions into the history unit. I think we have to also give them the opportunity that history is fun. History can be fun. And there are lots of lovely things we can do in history. But we have to, you know, get them thinking like historians and archaeologists, and what would they find and what would be the assumptions. Most kids in Sydney and probably around the bigger rural towns would not be able to say that they were using them as shoes. But once you show them, we'll be seeing a whole influx of shoes being used in this way and created. So it's not just about, you know, fact finding and getting students to just look at objects like shells, etc. We have to be able to get them to think differently about what history might look like in their lifetimes. So this is just one way that might occur. Lost my mouse again. It's gone to the other screen. You little bugger. Here we go. So because we do have other historical representations, you know, the top right-hand picture is the black and white of Brewarrina fish traps. My community happens to be Gunditjmara, also where saltwater meets freshwater, where there's lots of eels, and also the UNESCO listing of fish traps, you know, and heritage listing, the most recent example. But there are other Asian cultures and others that have different kinds of fish traps that are also linked to things like the plastic bottles, and they trap the little fish and then use them as bait fish to get the big fish. So we've got lots of innovation, if you like, from historical things like the Bree fish traps or the Gunditjmara fish traps, and then other communities doing, other Indigenous communities doing the same sorts of things globally. So it gives students an understanding that these things are not just happening in our in our location, that they're happening everywhere historically. So now I want to move on to some other complexities, if you like, within the Australian historical record, insofar as a lot of our, we often refer to it as the material remains in the archaeological record are missing, because much of it is based on feathers, fur, fins, and fibre. And when we're looking for what remains after 50 or 100 or 150 years, we don't see any of it because of the way in which the Australian environment impacts on those archaeological remains. So we have to be able to take students on that journey, that not everything is always going to be easily locatable, because things like fibre craft, and a bit of weaving here, very badly done by me, and other things like pieces of paper bark and possum skins and kangaroo skins eventually deteriorate because of the environment, and we don't find them often in the archaeology record in Australia. So we find them very rarely, and most of the record that we see is that early colonial record, rather than the record of it actually in the prehistory, pre-contact. And that's because, and we know they exist because the colonial record has helped in the documentation that they obviously were very much part of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. Feathers, furs and fins were very much part of those communities, and in many communities are still existing today, and in other communities are being revitalised. Possum skin graduation jackets, if you like, or cloaks have been very much more part of the university graduation process in more recent years for many of our Aboriginal graduates in universities. So we are trying to bring back, if you like, some of those traditions of the past. So let's look at what is required in this particular topic area and how we as future teachers intend to plan that. NESA give us some ideas, and of course the department give us ideas, and then there's a range of other people who are very generous and put other ideas out there. So everybody, when they become a teacher, has to embody what it is they are passionate about, whether it's the feathers, the fins, the fur. My more recent passions are around digital printing of animal remains, and I'll show you one of those in a little while. But it doesn't matter which teacher gives you a program to work off, and even the ideas I'm giving you today, until you become quite well versed. So we improve our background knowledge to a level that's almost working towards deep knowledge in terms of quality teaching. No one of us in the room can be able to duplicate what everybody else does in terms of their teaching and the way they deliver. So I think we need to remember that delivery is everything. Many of you probably won't wear the plastic bottles into the class, but I get a lot of fun out of it, and it works for me. So, you know, everybody to their own. NESA require us in New South Wales to spend 50 hours on this ancient world and the depth studies. So there's 3 depth studies. They recommend a minimum of 5 hours in, or 10% of the teaching time, to frame the topic and to get us all interested in the history. And then we have to make selections about whether we do Egypt, Greece and Rome, or India and China in the other 2 depth studies. And so my program in this particular presentation refers to a future program that looks at Egypt and China. And that's because I've been to both those countries. One recently, more recently, and one a long time ago. So I have a lot of my own resources. So it makes life very different in the classroom when you have your own stuff and you're not having to do just stuff from the internet or various other sources. So what that means is that the ancient world, we've got 5 hours to start the kind of conversations around dating and historical timelines, etc. And it leaves about 15 hours for each of those depth studies. So about, and a regular classroom has, you know, usually 60-minute lessons. So it's about 15 lessons of each topic. So that's where our professional judgment has to come in. And of course, some of us have got strengths and some of us have got other areas where we're still developing knowledge. So hopefully we'll be able to work out what each one of you might need when we get to question time. Just yeah, probably not the health guidelines. Yeah, I know. I'm a rule breaker, not a rule maker. I'm a shocker. So when we look at these topic areas, investigating the ancient past has 6 outcomes that we have to meet. Of course, when we look at those outcomes, I always like to look at the directives of those outcomes or the key word. So we have to be able to describe, identify, use, locate, use, select, use. So that usually implies that there's going to be substantial amount of writing. And what we know is students don't particularly like a lot of writing. So we do need to work on perhaps also increasing that to oral presentations, doing things like short TikToks, little voiceovers. So in this particular unit of work, I've got them doing a breaking news radio announcement so that those that aren't confident in filming themselves can just do it as a sound bite. That could be incorporated into an assessment task. But the directives on the outcomes really suggest a lot of lexically dense work. And so we have to work on how we're going to get children to read in Year 7. Often very difficult, and has been very difficult because of things like COVID. So the first area that we're supposed to be looking at post the rest of the unit of work is this notion of out of Africa theory. And for historically, a lot of what has happened in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander timelines does not fit the out of Africa theory. And that's why Australia is such a unique space, is that sometimes some of our historical record challenges those early theories. And sometimes even more recent discoveries are continuing to challenge those out of Africa theories, particularly things like Mungo Woman. So, and the syllabus kind of makes it difficult sometimes for us to make decisions because it suggests things that may not necessarily be relevant or included in ancient Australia. And by that I mean things such as writing, script, and pottery. We do have iconography, we do have art, and we do have tools, but we don't have any pottery, and therefore there are different ways we produce food, there are different ways that writing was communicated through iconography rather than an actual alphabet or other kind of scripts. So, you know, that we do have to, in the introduction of this topic, also have to introduce other worlds, because the syllabus is suggesting we have to talk about writing and pottery. So we either have to talk about early forms of writing, like the Egyptians and the symbols and icons that then became a language, and pottery, like canoptic jars and all of those kinds of things which contain body parts. So we've got those things, but we also have this challenge where Aboriginal people always talk about they've been here forever, but the historical record wants to start at about 60,000 years. And so it doesn't meet necessarily up with our understandings of the dreaming in many communities, that we somehow migrated across from areas in Asia and other areas. Things such as DNA are constantly putting that kind of theory in conflict. And then, of course, Mungo Woman and art in the top end that have been dated via various methods also put the 60,000 year time frame in doubt. So these are really difficult concepts because even the syllabus doesn't necessarily present them in a way that's easily accessible to those of us who are feeling that we have to, in the early career, teach exactly to the dot point. And there are other examples, but so we have to think about how we're going to do those differently, because in the next dot point, the syllabus says key features of ancient society, farming, trade, social classes, religion, rule of law, and doesn't talk about spirituality and other more complex systems like Aboriginal worldviews and Aboriginal ways of knowing and those interconnections. So when we look at the three spheres of the Aboriginal world, the human sphere, the physical sphere, and the sacred sphere, when I'm looking at my own physical sphere, I'm Gabbage, which is the red-tailed black cockatoo from Gunditjmara country. So I'm sitting up there in the animals space, and that means that the white cockatoo is our opposite. There are marriage lines associated with that, so I can only technically marry white cockatoo. In some other communities, this is even more complex about who is in communities like Yonglu, where we tell who's Bapamukul. These are very complex things and beyond the scope of the syllabus. We don't need to know about them. But there are also things that make good sense in terms of the syllabus when we're trying to explain, well, why don't things always fit? Because we don't have this hierarchy of communities and the hierarchy of particular other civilizations that appear in this part of the syllabus. And by that I mean, I'm going to jump a slide and then come back. So it makes more sense. When we're looking at either Egypt and or China, we as teachers definitely teach the social pyramids of each of these communities, and we talk about the social structures and the classes of those communities. And our lessons generally focus on the meta language of the pharaoh, the government officials, the soldiers, the scribes, merchants, craftsmen. So when we're looking for different things in quality teaching, we're looking for that kind of hierarchical understanding. And then when we go back to our Aboriginal community, we have elders and we have things such as rite of passage, but we don't necessarily have this kind of hierarchical structure because no one owns community, and we don't have those kinds of Western notions of community in that same sense. So these are very complex ways of looking at our families and our communities, because in many communities, our aunts and our uncles are also our mothers and our fathers, and our cousins, in the sense, are our sisters and brothers. So for my community and my family, I have 52 first cousins in a Western sense, but they are all my brothers and sisters. And I have 8 uncles and 7 aunties. Well, I had 8 uncles and 7 aunties. My mum was one of 13. And so they're all my mothers and fathers. And they are part of who guides me. So they're very different ways of looking at family, about family relationships, also about rules of behaviour, about who are the important people in those communities. And of course, then we have elders that don't necessarily have to be old, which confuses a lot of people. And they say, you know, how old do you have to be an elder? And I say, you don't get to choose if you become an elder. The community chooses when you become the elder, and they start using those labels. And so it's very difficult to have a cleansed, easy teaching version of ancient Australia. Okay, and I have a real tension around ancient Australia because it's still living Australia, Aboriginal Australia. So when we then look at the next part of what we're supposed to look at, is that we have to look at other threatened sites. And of course, Australia has many threatened sites, and one of them probably more recently has been Uluru, and the debate around that as an ancient site, but also about current application. But students could look at these threatened sites as small groups. You could do it as Venn diagrams if you want to go into any detail, etc. But you need to be mindful that you only have 15 hours. And what becomes your focus? Does it become this, or is it becoming more of the broader scope of ancient Australia? And I say the latter is more important. But it's important that students know where these sites are, that where they might put them on a map. It's certainly perhaps their first introduction to sites that are threatened or endangered, which we then pick up in the later part of this unit of work when we look at UNESCO and other sites. So when we're looking at the out of Africa theory with our students, of course, these are going to be complex things, and we're going to have kids sometimes not necessarily understanding or going off the off task in these areas. So what we need to do is be mindful that we as teachers, and I've got this, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with 8 Ways and Tyson Yunkaporta's stuff, but this is the Torres Strait Islander drum. And basically it's quality teaching, and what happens in the front of a lesson, what happens in the middle of a lesson, what happens at the end of a lesson, or what happens at the beginning of a unit, what happens in the middle of the unit, and what happens at the end of a unit is what we're hoping to strive for. So, you know, at the beginning of the unit, we spend quite a bit of time on narratives, developing students' background knowledge, and certainly developing cultural knowledge. That turns into the problematic knowledge. So what are our problems in this area? You know, what is the ancient past? Who are the ancient civilizations? What were the what are the main features of history and archaeology? All those kinds of questions become our sub-questions, and that sometimes we have to, particularly in this topic deal with lots of difficult meta language. There is lots of difficult meta language, and we have to work on it probably more than any other area. But once we get students on board with the meta language of a historian, we usually have caught them in the trap of thinking more historically. If we miss that opportunity and we don't use the technical or meta language of the subject or the site, students can't be then seeing themselves as future archaeologists, anthropologists, ethnographers, all of those sorts of things, because they don't feel confident, because they don't have that language base to work from. So we do have to work a lot on what I call JIT strategies, the just-in-time teaching. When we introduce some fun meta language and you get the students to use that, and when we're talking about places like Mungo or other places, we might also talk about a technical term that appears in that site. And, lunettes is one of those particular things, which are the crescent-shaped sand dunes of Lake Mungo. To do something really fun, which you probably don't know exists, is that National Parks in 2017 produced some drone footage of Lake Mungo, and you can view that through virtual reality glasses. So if you can get those VR glasses, the cheaper version ones, you can actually have a very fun lesson where students can zoom in and look at Lake Mungo using the 3D technology, or the VR technology. And if you're lucky enough to have a few pairs of VR glasses, that's even more fun. That could be part of the process of thinking about what's at the site and what can we see with our own eyes. And sometimes we can see the lunettes, sometimes we can see the footprints that are there through these glasses. So I've put those in the unit of work, and it is one of those things that's a bit more exciting than just watching a video. If you can watch a drone technology over the site, it's quite spectacular. That comes out of the WilderQuest 360. And there are 6 Aboriginal sites that were used and filmed using drone technology. There's units of work for stage 1 through to stage 3. So I know I've got quite a few primary people also in today's talk. So you might want to go off and have a look at WilderQuest 360 and some of what they have in terms of the Aboriginal space and virtual reality glasses and support materials as well. And I was one of the writers on that. I wrote the original stuff, and then they've actually rewritten and ramped it up a little bit because I told them they missed some opportunities. So again, when we're looking, there's research tasks. History requires a lot of researching, and some students just don't like it. So we've got to, maybe they become scribes and they do the drawing parts of the recording of the research. We have to think differently about how we're measuring student success in this space. We don't always have to have a written version. We certainly can have a spoken version. The things that you might also want to do in terms of this particular part of the unit is you might want to introduce the other fun facts that happen, because we had to find the features of ancient societies, and we could say to the students using post-it notes and in small groups, tell me what you think China is responsible for, and in terms of what we got from an ancient civilization, And it could be areas in agriculture, the arts, science, engineering, maths, or everyday items. And they've got to think about all the things that they may have in their everyday life. And there's a few things that are there for the more rural and regional students, like the iron ploughshare, and other things, paper money. But all of those things are, and you can play for house points. So you can make it a little bit more challenging, and then you can show them the list of all the things and see how many people thought of other things that China was responsible for, if you like, in the historical record. I'm just going to take a quick drink. So it's important that we have a lot of visuals for kids. And so getting them to do the mind map is one exercise, but then getting them to check and add to their own mind maps is really important so that they put it there for themselves. That works a lot on Dale's learning theory, where we have to help students develop skills so that they can recall information later on when we ask them to do it in exams or other things. So handwriting and then also adding to documents consistently. You might do this as a wall chart, you might do this as just a mind map. Lots of different ways that we can get students to think about sources, and then from those sources we have to get them to think about primary or secondary sources. And I'll show you what the program looks like in a moment. But then we go back to the main unit, and it asks us to define key terms and concepts related to historical time, the roles of historians and archaeologists. So we have to make sure that we're asking good questions of the students, and we're digging out of them what they understand and what are other professions that are linked to history. So we can have one group, you might give them an instruction of what ethnographers do, archaeologists do, anthropologists do, cryptographers do, linguists do, forensic scientists who've become much more part of the historical investigation part in more recent times, and the paleontologists like Ross in the series from Friends. You know, he bangs on about he's a paleontologist. He's, you know, not just somebody who works in a museum, but he's basically dinosaur crazy. So from that, we might also look at, for gifted and talented or an assessment task, we might research the researchers in the Australian context. And I'm not sure how many of you know how many historians, ethnographers, etc., are in that early colonial ethnographic investigation. But there is, in the package, you'll get a very big text that I've located of all the German ethnographers that explored Australia and their contributions. So that's one of the things that you might develop up. If you are in South Australia, of course, you'll have access to the museum there and the Strello collection, extensive, massive collection, and also Spencer's work. But there are many, many others. So Father Worms, who was working in Broome, and I know I've got at least one teacher from Broome, so I added to the list of possibilities here because we are teaching an Australian curriculum. So, you know, you can do a range of things with your assessment tasks too. So it depends on where you would like to focus that assessment item on, whether it's understanding historians, ethnographers, anthropologists that are working in the field, or whether you want to focus on things such as the Aboriginal historical record. It depends on how you might angle your assessment tasks. You might do ICT and small group investigations. We are expected to look at one historical controversy, and those of us who've taught history long enough may have the old access to our old stuff in a previous syllabus where this was part of ancient history in year 11, in prehistory, in the preliminary course. And you might look at Lindale Man, Gurrabal Man, Windley Girl, Talon Man, and look at those as your historical controversy or your history mystery. And in doing that, you might set it up so that the students actually have to investigate something, and you tell them what it is. A body's been found buried in the ground. There's a wealth of artefacts around it, rather sinister suggestions about the circumstances of this person's death. You're called for your expertise as the historical investigator for the crime investigation show. So you might show them a crime investigation show or a snippet of it, and then get them to unpack that mystery like a television show. And they can even do acting out roles, etc., to do that. The other great history mystery that fits very nicely into this is Narrabeen Man. So Narrabeen Man is the history mystery of a very odd Sydney bus stop where they were excavating to do new things. And of course, they came across what is now known as Narrabeen Man. And his death was seen to be quite suspicious. And there's a whole Australian curriculum unit of work there already done, and I'll put the links to that in this package, that you could do as your history mystery. So there are many, many options, and you could change it up every couple of years, or you could just develop up further the Narrabeen Man stuff from the Australian history side. There are other ones if you want to focus on the female aspect. If you're working at a female, at a girls' school, you might want to do Yud Girl. So there are a range of them. Bodies in the bog are great. Bog bodies are particularly interesting, but also particularly useful because they have particular unique reasons why they're preserved, because they've been in peat and the level of acid, etc., becomes a great way to tell another story about how we find such important information from very preserved bog bodies or peat bodies. Things I like to do, and Hayden was there yesterday in our tutorial. We did our mini, well, some of us did our mini archaeological site. I showed them how to set up a mini archaeological site. In my site, I tend to pop in a few shells, particularly oysters. We've done a lot of work on middens in our unit of work, but also I'm lucky enough to have a very good team behind me who print for me animal body parts. So this is Rufus, he's the red kangaroo. So you can change your archaeological dig box up time after time. Rufus we've had around for quite a while. It's really good because he's printed in 2 parts. I will give you access to those if you've got a digital printer. They take about 16 hours. You don't have to fill out all that additional department paperwork around working with human and animal remains. They're plastic, they're highly durable. It doesn't matter if the kids drop them or if they break them. I don't know how you break one, but the smaller ones I do. But the bigger ones, if they break them, it costs you $16 to print one again. if you were trying to buy them in a school and you were buying a kangaroo head, it's about $200 to buy one. And then you have to fill out all the paperwork. So these digitally printed ones are great. And they cost about $16. We're in the process here at uni of printing a wombat head. It's taking 38 hours. But I do have little platypus heads. I've got one with a skull damage where it's obviously been hit on the head and killed for food source. So I'm honouring poor platypus today because I've got him on. But we have also just been doing, this is our other new one. Can anyone see this one? This one's, any ideas, people?
Is it an echidna?
It is. Very good. So we've got an echidna happening. Other things I like to put in my box, of course, I'm lucky. I've got a few authentic. These were gifted to me a long time ago. This is a beautiful rock which has a very smooth side, and a beautiful hand holding piece for skinning kangaroos. So I sometimes put that in the box. I've got a shard off this one, sorry about which is the beginnings of a spearhead. A lot of school science departments have lots of things sitting around in boxes, gathering dust. I've got other samples. I've got some very rare ones which are from coastal communities and other communities where they sharpen fish hooks on. So we sharpen the shells to make the fish hooks. So they're quartz based, and you can see the grinding areas in there where there's been hours and hours of rubbing to sharpen fish hooks. So these are great because students can handle them. And then, of course, I always put in a range of shells, which are the things that we would find in middens. So the sandbox is, a very useful archaeological kind of lesson. It's one of those ones that I do with my pre-service teachers. I do a big sandbox, and then we set the room up like an archaeological dig so that they can be pretend archaeologists and anthropologists. It gives them an insight into what they might do in their own classrooms. So most of what I've bought is from Bunnings. It's fairly cheap, or the $2 shop. I'm also pretty lucky, I live close to the sea, so I can get I've got a black brim head, and I've got a snapper head that I literally bought from the fish shop and boiled up and then threw out on the lawn for the birds to eat, all the bits off, and then I dry it out. But of course we do have to worry about anaphylaxis, etc. So this is just one snippet out of the many possibilities I've put in the program on the right-hand side. Jubin Beach is also in Sydney. It's in Cronulla, so it's a Durrell site. It's really kind of, for me, so important to try and do local examples. So in Broken Hill or other communities, Blaney, you might have to do a bit of, local research to see what the local possibilities might be. But we do have to talk about middens and what the middens tell us. Why are the middens in Sydney all missing? Because most of them ended up in the colonial buildings in the rocks. And do we have any sites? We do, of course. And we're very lucky in Sydney because there's a beautiful site which we normally go to in the schools, but of course, I've just got to get the mouse on the right side again, where I'm able to call on New South Wales heritage officers like Karen Smith, and we meet the students down at a place called Berry Island, which is right in the middle of Sydney, at Waverton. So you can catch the train. And at that site, we have a midden, we have a petroglyph or rock engraving, we have grinding grooves, we have bush food, bush tucker, and we have oysters living there now. So we've got all of those sorts of things. And the site is nice and small, very manageable, work health and safety wise for students. Bit of a hidden secret of Sydney. And you can have students there for half a day probably and see all of those things in, small groups in about, a couple of hours. You do a lot of fact finding. It's also well signposted. So Gadian Track is there, and students can stop at different parts and see different things. So one of those very lucky things that we have locally. And what else have I got? What else have I got? Oh, no. So also using your contacts. So here in Sydney, I use the Heritage Office, and I use National Parks and Wildlife. I use Chris Tobin from National Parks, and I use a lot of Aboriginal sites like Red Hands Cave. We do the Three Sisters, we do Emu Rock. We've done other great sites such as the Australian Museum, which has a great collection and a great exhibition. So depending on the way in which you would position this, you would be able to do ancient Australia quite easily from either this very kind of I think it's quite simple, but it's probably more complex than I think it is, because I've been doing it a number of years. Or what you might do is think about developing it up so that one of your historical investigations is your own community, your own local community, or set up, like lots of teachers do, their own little mini dig in the school grounds. Now I'm just trying to get out of this to show you what the program's starting to look like before and you will get a copy of the slides, you'll get a copy of the program, and you'll get a number of resources that will support your teaching of this. So just let me get this little mouse over to here, and then I'll start share with the other document, which is not quite, oh no, definitely not that document. That's just a screen share. No. Go find the document. Sorry, guys, I'm just. So this other program example has some other really interesting things in terms of Padaragang and Dawes, and the diary, Dawes's diary. And for those of you who don't know who Padaragang is, she was a 15-year-old Aboriginal woman who worked with Dawes to decipher Australia's first languages, Aboriginal languages in the Sydney region. and you get to investigate two of the sources from that. So in the program, I've mapped out most of this to quality teaching in the beginning of the program. And then what is history? What do historians do? Basically walks you through some of what I've just shown you in the PowerPoint, giving you the ideas of when it's a watch, then do, think, pair, share, what is considered time. So there's quite a bit of time spent on the historical skill of time. It then works in your favour when you're moving on to Egypt and China, because you don't have to revisit some of those big meta language concepts. Then we look at centuries. We look at scavenger hunts as a possibility, where you're setting up tables with sources on them. This is the Patera Gang and Doors articles, and some teacher notes from the department that really say to us, the department's fairly clear that we have to spend some time developing meta language, because without that meta language, it's hard to move forward. What are primary and secondary sources? Our history mysteries. What are some of the questions we should be asking students? The option to do Narrabeen Man I've put in there, and hence why I haven't got it ready for you today, because I moved a few things around and then went, oh my God, it's put my whole sequence out. So I have to go back and redo it. I'm sure you all know what that means. Out of Africa theory, some sub-lessons into things you would do if you were going to use the Narrabeen Man. Making sure that we...
Excuse me, Shirley, there's a really loud noise that's coming across. Oh, it's just stopped. That's the noise.
That's the noise? That's my fan on my body to keep me cool, because they've turned off the aircon and I'm getting a headache.
Okay, let's
Sorry about that. I've turned it off. So basically I've written most of the program for you. I've also put some Dharawal words in there for each of the shells, so you can do a sub-lesson if you want to do some really creative stuff. Then I've gone on to the UNESCO stuff, which is part of the last bit, and you might look at also the most recent Gunditjmara case of heritage listing. And then there is I haven't quite finished the marking criteria for you, but there's going to be an assessment item example there for you, all the sources and all of the other bits and pieces. So hopefully, and Jagan's Head, the return and repatriation of Jagan's Head is one of those options in this particular thing, in this particular unit of work that you might want to do. So I've also looked at who owns the past, etc. So hopefully you'll be well equipped with more ideas and fresh ideas to build that ancient Australia stuff. So with that, I'm going to ask and say thank you for listening. And also, have you got any big questions you want to ask me? Do you think it was okay? Have you got some ideas? Have you got some new people you might introduce to the ancient Australia context in terms of units of work that you might want to do? You will get everything, okay? And I'll just show you, there's a whole bunch of stuff I'm going to put in a Dropbox that you guys can access, but I just didn't get it organized today. but it will look like this. So basically you're going to get a number of resources that I'm organising in some sort of relevant way. So you're going to get some Greenwich Mara stuff, you're going to get intro activities to the unit, Mungo Man, Narrabeen Man, Padaragang, some professional knowledge stuff on ancient Australia, the Wilderquest resources, the Yagan Head and repatriation stuff, and anything else I can find when I'm tidying up the unit of work for you before I give it to you. So hopefully everyone got something out of that today.
There's one question from Fiona. She said, do you have any recommendations of resources for the ancient history case study on ancient Australia?
There's all of those, yeah. So I've got all of those are going to be, so there'll be Narrabeen Man, there'll be the Jubin Beach one, and there's Berry Island I'll put in there as well. So there'll be 3 case studies they could do.
What benefit is there in connecting kids to things like renaming of places?
Oh, good question. Renaming them back into Aboriginal names or renaming them into non-Aboriginal names, because it goes both ways. You know, we've already had Blackstown turned into Blacktown, and then they wanted to change it to any other thing but Blacktown, because they don't want to be reminded of the historical record there. And I think in Sydney we've got you know, we've got a long history of suburbs that are already in Aboriginal names, like Bondi is Bundy, but Parramatta is Parramatta, Gadigal is, you know, so we do have a lot of it. I think we just, because we've grown up around it and because we're very familiar with our names, we perhaps don't understand that we've actually got quite a balance of, well, not a balance, but we do have a lot of Aboriginal names in our everyday life. But perhaps we need to make it more explicit.
Yeah, I was referring to the current case down in Tasmania where they're wanting to rename one of the bays from some of the local Indigenous groups. There's a bay that's named after some French explorer, Maru Bay.
Oh, God, like La Perouse over here in Sydney.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I wasn't familiar with that one, Annette.
Yeah, there's one in Tasmania at the moment where there's just a nice little case study of it. Yeah, I'm taking my kids to Jubin Beach if it ever stops raining.
If it stops raining, and be very careful.
I've cancelled my excursion 3 times. So you've got a case study on Jubin Beach. The problem I've got is I was trying to do it through national parks, where one of the elders actually takes you around.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, but that's not available because of COVID issues and staffing, etc., etc., etc.
And you really have to know where you're going, because there's one road that you drive out and you've got to go 16 Ks out, and then you've got to go to 10 clicks of the posts, and then you stop, and then literally you walk between trees and go on a track, and there's this most amazing space.
Yeah,
I've been on it.
Yeah, I'm just going to take them to some of the rock carvings.
Yeah, some of the rock carvings.
That's the easiest bit for me to find. I can't take them on the rest of it because I don't know it. And it's not my history either.
Yes, and when he takes you on, I get him to take some of my Aboriginal pre-service teachers on it. It's an amazing thing, and we sit in the cave, and we have great really conversations.
I don't have access. One, I don't have access to the information. I don't have access to the
key people
story that goes with it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I want the kid. I have 99% of my students are non-nationals. So they've not grown up at all in Australia. I do not have any students with any Indigenous cultural background either. And the question I'm always asked is, why do we need to, why is this important? What's it got to do with anything? Because to them, it doesn't seem particularly relevant.
Yeah.
Which is something we hear quite a bit.
Well, and all students have to understand their place in the Australian historical record.
Well, this is right. And I do tell them that we do look at other forms of migration history in Australia so they can understand some of the struggles that migrants have faced.
Yes, but it's later on in the historical record.
Yeah.
That we're doing these things from a timeline.
Well, that's right.
Base.
And I'm wanting them to appreciate the importance of why is it important to acknowledge a prehistory to a colonial history? I'm wanting them to get that cemented in their minds. But part of that is understanding that there's certain cultural practices and sensitivities that go along with these places. So say the rock carvings, there's certain significances of these to the various groups that maintain that area. I know there's lots of other rock carvings and things in that national park, but they're kept.
They're much more quiet.
They're kept as sacred.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, because we don't want everyone trudging on them, which is what people do. Yeah, and I just don't have, personally, I don't have the background to be teaching them that. So I feel a little fraudulent, would you say?
Yeah, look, it is hard because you've tried to engage with the appropriate people. They're just not available at this point.
Yeah.
And I would say don't give up on that. But, you know, post-COVID, I think when we get to a world that is post-COVID, I think you'll be able to resume those kinds of interrelationships with your classes. But I think it's always much more powerful, and you obviously have had that experience in it, where when we engage an Aboriginal expert from those communities, in that the experience dissipates many of those questions that your other students are already raising.
Yeah.
That's that question of authenticity and what makes the difference. And the difference is when they hear it from somebody else who's not the teacher, but is the expert, who comes from the community, there's a level of different respect that comes with that. And listening. So we talk about listening as dadiri, or deep listening, you know, that there is a deep listening that happens with our students once they've heard it from an elder.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose that's the current difficulty that I'm facing in teaching this one, because I've changed it from, I used to do Shogun history, and I've changed it and said, no, we're going to do Indigenous because you guys know nothing.
Yeah, so I'm just going to move on because we've got like three participants with hands raised. That's okay. And we can have a chat another time about that. Carol.
Oh, I thank you. I'll try and make it really quick. Two questions, if I may. So my first question is, just wanted to get your take. So for teachers like myself, who obviously have a lot of respect for Indigenous culture, but I'm not Indigenous that I'm aware of anyway. I do wonder, but, you know, a lot of ancestors, some people hide that. But
there's a lot of skeletons in a lot of people's closets, I'm sure.
But I just wanted to, you know, I'm always really careful not to sort of over-teach. You know, it's always, I say, look, this is information, but I'm not Indigenous myself. I just wanted to get what's the correct approach.
Look,
so that
it's always good if a school's using their local decision making to at least have one experience, you know, maybe every 2 terms with Aboriginal experts coming in to take off some of the load of teachers, but also to give teachers time to process what those elders are communicating to the students as well. But it means establishing relationships with those communities and relationships with the local AECGs, Aboriginal education consultative groups and seeing who they have in their, books that could go out and help individual schools. And
we do have
we
do have a good connection to the local AECG, but not so much in a history context.
And that's, we've got to find those history experts.
Yeah, thank you. And my other quick question, if I may, was just, is there any way of acquiring or making replica things like hand axes and things? Because that'd be a really nice tactile thing.
I make little bone pieces out of pottery and fire them. I'm a potter as well, so I've got these other skills that, like Hayden and my pre-service teachers, they all make their own oyster, and they're getting it when they come back from oyster shell, because, it helps them to remind them of the middens and the lesson, et cetera, But I think it's a hard one because the actual artefacts or getting somebody to make one for you is still going to cost you quite a significant amount of money.
It's just nice for kids to have that tactile, but obviously wouldn't want them to be handling the real thing, and they should
breaking
be
obviously.
Yes. Okay, so I was hoping you might know of a site or somewhere that.
Unfortunately, I mean, it's again that local contact and who's your local Aboriginal toolmaker. So I would be going to Uncle Wes or Uncle Greg here in Durrick, and both of them are getting on. They're both getting quite elderly and they're not making them so much.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
Rita, I know you had your hand up, but you've taken it down.
Yes, sorry, I've taken it down. Excuse the background noise from my family. I had a bit of a issue, like with especially with getting Aboriginal elders in, and it's really hard to get them into our school. My issue is also that they always ask for money, and I sometimes can't afford, $200.
And this is a real issue. This is a real issue because you want the expertise, but the schools don't want to pay. And and I say to them, we've got to actually come to a point where honorariums, a minimum honorarium, a payment, because they're coming in and they're spending time in your school.
We know that. Yeah, that's right. And so I had to remember to keep on budgeting for it, and I haven't budgeted this year for it, which is really bad of me.
Yeah.
But we've just got that issue where, and now like you said, Uncle Greg, who he used to come in for free a long time ago. He was younger then. He's so busy with other stuff going on.
But he also works.
Yeah, that's right. At the last time I heard was at the nursing home or hospital somewhere. Yeah. So I've got that kind of issue where they're now really scarce. So we kind of tapped into our local community elders who run a homework group. And then they came. It's near I'm not sure. I can't remember what it was called. I think it is Verbatim.
Yeah.
And they came once, but they didn't come again. So. We're just having that issue, where are we going to get that money from, and are they going to come? Are they not going to come? The turn up,
and that's a real issue for school execs. They really have to make it a priority, and it is teachers have to be able to demonstrate standard 1.4 and 2.4.
Yeah.
And you can't do it alone, and standard 6 and 7 say we have to engage with community.
Yes. And I'm sorry, someone wrote at the bottom, ask your community, like your parents. Sometimes we can't have these parents because it's some family issues within Indigenous communities, and we someone may get offended if we don't invite the other person. If we invite,
absolutely, it's very complex.
So it is very complex. So thank you. Yeah, I just want to know. I'm glad that you've acknowledge that, so it's not just our school that has that issue with money and no. Like that. Okay, thank you.
No, and I think it's getting worse with the local schools, local decisions, because there's so much other stuff that's been prioritised post-COVID, because we do need, some schools are getting COVID tutors, some schools are not getting COVID tutors, some schools have lost their Aboriginal education worker and their other contacts because numbers have dropped. people have moved. I'm waiting for the wave of Hawkesbury, all the flood, different areas, and the effects that's going to have on people's living arrangements, and they're going to have to move out of areas, and that's going to change, the demographic of some schools, and they're going to be then also having staffing issues.
Yeah, correct. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
No. Really valid stuff to be talking about, I think, as an Aboriginal presenter. Anybody else? Carol, you still got your hand up, but I think it's still up from previous. No more local schools and decisions. The SIP, to spend money on. And that's where it really becomes hard, because schools have to prioritise this stuff. And it's really hard for schools with low numbers of Aboriginal students to have the counter argument of why you need it even more. Because schools with Aboriginal students get other funding. The AECG can help you with access to community too. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. But again, AECGs in the local are all volunteers, who have other jobs as well. So we can't always expect them to come for nothing. And I've done a lot of freebies to schools, and I mean a lot in my career. And I'm still up for it. But, with COVID and all the rest of it, it's so complex for me to get into a school these days. I just have to, I'm either Zooming in or it's a non-event, because it's too risky at the moment. Yes, and we do have an Aboriginal ed policy that says it's there, and so it's hard when we've got policy and we've got recommendations and we've got syllabus requirements, and we're still not able to get Aboriginal expertise into schools. And it makes it really hard for some of these really important topic areas that frame other topics in later curriculum areas, and makes it less of a battle for us, the Annette battle that she's mentioned. Once you have elders come in and you have a different perspective, students have a different perspective of what is respect, etc., depending on the elders, of course, or the knowledge holders, and can make your path as a non-Aboriginal teacher teaching Aboriginal content very much easier when you've had that, when students have had that experience. Yes, and we do have a partnership agreement with the department, with the AECG. So there's all of these things that say we've got to do this and we've got to do it better. But I don't have an answer. I've been in this space for 35 years and not much is changing. So I don't have a magic wand, unfortunately. What I'd like to do is just duplicate me about 15 times and send me out to schools all the time. Kathy's going, yeah. And doing guest lectures all the time, and I've been, lucky enough, on and off to get good amounts of funding, and I did HSC boot camps and I did that round the country, and but what I found in the Aboriginal space is it always runs out, and then teachers the following year say, aren't you doing it this year? And I said, there's no funding. So recurrent funding versus that kind of non-recurrent funding is always going to be an issue in the Aboriginal space, I think, as well. Okay, well, it is close to finish. I'll get on to getting this out, and Liana's going to post you out or email everybody the details of where you can pick up all these resources. We've also recorded today's chat, so